Imagine spending your entire childhood doing something, not because you chose it, but because someone else decided it was your destiny. Imagine that person investing over $1 million into your life, controlling your every move, sneaking into your training rink in disguise just to watch your every step. And then imagine finally breaking free, retiring at just 16 years old, only for that same person to be furious at your decision. Now imagine coming back, on your terms, and that person is suddenly happy. Most people would feel relieved. Most people would feel grateful. But Alysa Liu, she was mad. And what she said about it in a recent interview sent shockwaves through the entire figure skating world, and honestly, through the internet itself. Because sometimes the most complicated relationships in our lives are the ones with the people who love us the most. This is Alysa Liu's story, and it is not what you think it is. Before we get into the drama, and trust me, we will get into it, you need to understand exactly who Alysa Liu is. Because without that context, none of this hits the way it should. Alysa Liu is not just a figure skater. She is arguably one of the most naturally gifted athletes the United States has ever produced in winter sports. Full stop. At just 13 years old, she became the youngest national champion in the entire history of American figure skating. Not just recently, ever. In the history of the sport in America. She was landing triple axels at an age when most kids are still figuring out middle school. She was competing on national stages while her peers were at sleepovers and football games. By the time the 2022 Beijing Olympics came around, Alysa was 16 years old and already a household name in the skating world. The expectations on her shoulders were enormous. And then, just like that, she walked away. No long farewell. No emotional press conference. She posted about it online. That's how the world found out. I didn't tell anybody, Alysa later recalled, because I knew I was going to get some pushback, and then I posted about it, and that's how everybody found out. A 16-year-old girl. One of the most promising athletes in America. Gone. But the question nobody was really asking loudly enough was, why? And the answer to that question leads us directly to her father. To understand Alysa, you have to understand Arthur Liu. Arthur is a Chinese-born lawyer who fled to the United States following the protests of 1989. He eventually settled in the Bay Area of San Francisco and built a life for himself from scratch. But Arthur didn't just want a career. He wanted a family. A big family. As a single father, he had 5 children through surrogacy and anonymous egg donors. Alysa is the eldest. Then came Selena, and then triplets, Julia, Joshua, and Justin. 5 children, single father, working full-time, with the help of his mother. By any measure, that is an extraordinary human being. And Arthur had one enormous passion beyond his family, figure skating. He steered Alysa into the sport early. And when it became clear she had generational talent, Arthur went all in. We are talking, according to a CBS 60 Minutes report, somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million invested into Alysa's career, coaching fees, training costs, travel to competitions across the country and around the world. Arthur was not just a supportive father cheering from the stands. He was the architect, the manager, the driving force behind everything. But here is where the story gets complicated. Because there is a very fine line between dedication and control. Between investment and ownership, between pushing your child toward greatness and pushing them to their breaking point. And Arthur Liu crossed that line. Alysa has been remarkably open about the intensity of her upbringing. And some of the details she has shared are genuinely difficult to hear. Arthur didn't just watch from a distance. He was deeply embedded in every aspect of her training. He had opinions about her coaches. He had opinions about her routines. He had opinions about everything. But perhaps the most telling detail, the one that really paints a picture of just how far things had gone, is this. Arthur Liu would sneak into Alysa's training rink, in disguise, to secretly monitor her coaches and take notes. Let that sink in for a second. This is not a father who occasionally showed up to practice. This is a father who felt the need to hide his identity just to maintain surveillance over his daughter's training environment. For Alysa, the sport that should have been her joy had become something else entirely. The pressure. the scrutiny, the constant feeling of being watched, managed, and controlled. By the time she was 16 and stepping off the ice in Beijing, she was exhausted. Not just physically, emotionally, mentally. She needed to breathe, so she retired, and her father was not happy about it. That moment, Arthur's anger at her retirement, planted a seed in Alysa that would grow into something she wouldn't fully confront until years later. For 2 years, Alysa Liu did something radical for someone of her profile. She lived like a normal teenager. No competitions, no pressure, no cameras tracking her every jump and landing. Just life. The kind of life she had been missing while the rest of the world was watching her make history on ice. And during those 2 years, something important happened. Alysa found herself again. She rediscovered who she was outside of skating, outside of her father's vision for her, outside of the expectations that had been placed on her since childhood. And when she eventually felt the pull back to the ice, because the talent never really leaves, does it? She came back with something she had never truly had before. Conditions. Non-negotiable ones. She was coming back on her terms. Her career. Her decisions. Her life. When Rolling Stone asked her if she had to fire her dad as her manager upon returning, her answer was sharp and revealing. She said she didn't have to fire him because, in her words, he was never there. That single sentence says more than a paragraph ever could. On March 7th of this year, Alysa sat down with Rolling Stone for what became one of the most talked about interviews in recent figure skating history. She was 20 years old, a 2-time Olympic gold medalist from the 2026 Milano Cortina Games, where she claimed the women's singles title, an achievement America had not seen since 2002. She was at the absolute peak of her sport, and she was asked about her father's reaction to her comeback. And this is where Alysa Liu said something that stopped people in their tracks. She didn't say she was touched by his happiness. She didn't say it brought them closer. She didn't offer a warm reconciliation-style answer that would make for easy headlines. Instead, she said, and I want you to really hear this, I don't know. I mean, he was happy. But that didn't matter to me. I didn't care that he was happy. I was almost mad that he was happy because I was like, how dare you? How dare you? And then she went even further. My dad doesn't deserve to be happy over this decision. Because you were mad when I quit. He shouldn't have an opinion on it at all. I didn't want him to be mad that I was coming back. I just didn't want him to care. Like, at all. The internet reacted immediately. Some people were shocked. Some were heartbroken. Some completely understood where she was coming from. Because what Alysa was expressing wasn't hatred. It wasn't cruelty. It was the voice of someone who had spent years having her autonomy taken from her, finally reclaiming it completely, even emotionally. Here is what I think people miss when they see those headlines and react with judgment. Alysa Liu is not a villain in this story. And honestly, neither is Arthur. Arthur Liu is a man who sacrificed enormously for his daughter, who invested everything, financially, emotionally, personally, into her future, who genuinely believed he was doing the right thing. But good intentions do not automatically equal healthy boundaries. Love does not automatically mean respect for someone's autonomy. And Alysa, from the moment she retired at 16 to the moment she stood on that Olympic podium at 20 with 2 gold medals around her neck, has been doing the hard, painful, necessary work of figuring out who SHE is, not who her father needed her to be, not who the sport demanded she be, who SHE is. And maybe the most powerful part of this entire story is not the drama. It's not the quote. It's not even the gold medals. It's the image of Arthur Liu sitting in the stands at the 2026 Olympics, not as a manager, not as a controller, not as the architect, but simply as a father, watching his daughter. From a distance, she said. And Alysa, after her victory, sharing a hug with him. Not because everything is fixed. Not because the complicated history has been erased. But because sometimes a hug from a distance is the most honest kind of love there is. That's Alysa Liu's story. And it is far from over. If the story hit you in a way you weren't expecting, you're not alone. Drop a comment below and tell me what you thought about Alysa's words. And if you want more stories like this one, you already know what to do.